Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to philosophy class once again. This is our online class number 7 for Wednesday, April 1st, 2020. So we're taking up the Symposium. We're a couple classes compressed because, as you remember, we lost a couple classes Friday the 13th, and I think it was Monday the 16th, when classes were canceled and we went online on the 18th. So we're going to omit a few sections of the Symposium, and I'll review for you very briefly what happens in those sections. First of all, what is the Symposium? In ancient Greek society and Athenian society, the Symposium was a drinking party, not the way in which we actually use the word nowadays. We think of some sort of a meeting or a meeting of people to exchange ideas, or a work-related meeting and so forth. The topic is love. What is love? And you can see these questions that I've noted for you in your notes. What's the best kind of love? What's the proper object of love? Is there an ordered versus a disordered love? And we'll see all of those examples as we go through the Symposium. What is under consideration in the first few speeches that we'll look at, the ones that we would have read but aren't really going to have time to read now. You can certainly read through them all if you want. The speeches of Phaedrus, Pausanias, Eryximachus, and Aristophanes are all definitely concerned with erotic love, romantic love, and very much focused on the bodily element of erotic love. You might remember the 4 loves that I mentioned to you when we were studying the Republic. You have family or affection love. You have friendship, erotic or romantic love, and agape, the love of God. So the topic of the Symposium is to some extent focused on erotic or romantic love in a bodily sense. Now, when we get to Socrates, of course, remember Socrates' first 3 words in the Republic. You should be reciting those to yourself right now. What are the first 3 words of the Republic? I went down, right? And so, Socrates isn't real fond of being down. You can now recall and remember from the Republic what that refers to. You're one of the prisoners. You're chained to the to the bench in the cave, or you're at the bottom of the line. You're in the world of shadows and images and false opinions of all sorts. So you know that Socrates is not going to be interested in erotic love, erotic attraction in the same way that the other interlocutors are in the Symposium. Socrates can still be said to be in that realm of erotic love, but the focus is now on the soul, not on the body. All right, well, that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. First, let's see what happens in the earlier part. As usual with Plato, we have an important philosophical work written in a dramatic form. So we have not only important philosophical ideas, just as we did in the Republic, but we have them in the form of a very beautifully constructed drama. And you'll notice that there are really only 2 participants here in the Symposium. The first, right off the bat, is a fellow named Apollodorus, and he's speaking to someone that is called simply a friend. The friend he refers to later on, a page or 2 later, as a rich businessman. Now, it's sort of a narration within a narration, because Apollodorus is going to end up telling the friend the story that he had earlier told to Glaucon, who's probably the same Glaucon as we encountered in the Republic, the brother of Plato. And when he told the story to Glaucon, and as he's now telling it to his friend, the rich businessman, as they're walking from one city to another, he is relating a story told by Aristodemus. So throughout most of the Symposium, we kind of consider Aristodemus to be the main storyteller. It's Aristodemus that tells the story of running into Socrates, Socrates being dressed up, which was unusual, has on his fancy sandals, he's bathed, and he's going to a celebration, he's going to a party. And the party and the celebration that he's going to is at Agathon's house, and it's in honor of Agathon himself having won first prize in the tragedy competition. He's a tragedian, he's a writer of tragedy, just as Aristophanes was a writer of comedy. So Socrates and Aristodemus begin to walk on towards Agathon's house. Socrates, several times while he's walking, stops and seems to be completely lost in thought. And Aristodemus waits for them. And finally, and Aristodemus, by the way, has not been formally invited by Agathon. Socrates just said, come along with me. And of course, Socrates knows that nobody's going to challenge him on something like that. So Socrates falls into one of these, or he doesn't fall into it, he gets into it because he's in deep thought, into one of these sort of contemplative ecstasies as he's walking along, thinking through some problem or another. Gets stuck on the neighbor's porch to Agathon, and Aristodemus ends up in front of Agathon's door. The servants run out and see him and bring him in, and Agathon says, oh, it's great you're here, I meant to invite you, and so forth. Where's Socrates? Because they know that Aristodemus follows Socrates around all the time. Well, at any rate, Aristodemus says, he's over at the neighbor's porch, and he's lost in thought. And Agathon first tells his servant to go get him, to bring him in. And Aristodemus says, no, you better just let him finish. He'll come as soon as he's ready. So Socrates does come into the party. And of course, this is ancient Greek society where you're not really sitting in chairs. You're lying on couches and you're eating the food that is put before you. Everybody else is already there, and there are several other people besides the ones that are mentioned in the dialogue, supposedly. And so Socrates comes in and he takes the only available space to lie, which is next to Agathon. Now, we're not going to go into the detail on this, but the significance of who is laying or lying next to whom is important in terms of the kind of bodily relations that these men have with one another. At any rate, this party followed a party the previous evening, and all the men drank too much. They have hangovers, and so someone says, well, why don't we not drink tonight? Why don't we send out the flute girl, the prostitute, let's not drink, and let's give speeches. What are we going to give speeches about? And Eryximachus makes the proposal that let's give speeches about love. Everybody agrees. Socrates agrees. He says, that's actually something I know something about, so let's give speeches on love. So Phaedrus, who's kind of in charge, in a sense, of directing the affairs, says, all right, we're going to go around this way, and we're all going to praise love and do that this evening instead of the normal debauchery and drinking and so forth. Phaedrus, in fact, gives the first speech. There are Phaedrus, Pausanias, Eryximachus, and Aristophanes. 4 speeches that come before the speech of Agathon, who's the host and the guest of honor, and so therefore 5 speeches which come before the speech of Socrates. Now, Phaedrus gives a very short speech. You can see his main line there, love is the most ancient of gods, the most honored. So Phaedrus starts out doing what the others are going to do, and that is praising love as a god. It sounds rather honorable, it sounds rather highfalutin, but if you look more carefully, if you have a chance to look a little bit more carefully at what Phaedrus and the others say, you'll find that they're not really focused on any godlike qualities in terms of the gods themselves, but rather they're focused on godlike qualities in terms of how they are given evidence in bodily relations among men. You will see this in the very brief speech of Phaedrus. It's only a couple of pages. And you will notice that Phaedrus, as do the others, speaks very specifically as in terms of a lover and his boy. There was a practice in ancient Greek society. We might refer to it as mentorship. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes this mentorship involved physical relations among the lover, the older man, and the younger man. Not a boy in the sense of a child, but a boy in the sense of, a late teenager or early 20s or mid 20s or whatever it might be. And you'll notice that Phaedrus, near 180b, makes the statement, a lover is more godlike than his boy, since he is inspired by the god. That's probably about the most inspiring thing that Phaedrus says. It's relatively uninspiring speech, and it's brief, mercifully. Pausanias is next. Now, Pausanias tries again to draw the focus away from the body. He doesn't last very long at it, but he does so by proposing that there are two kinds of love, a common love and a heavenly love. He makes a very interesting statement just above 181a. Considered in itself, he says, no action is either good or bad. Why would he say something like that? Well, because to some extent, this essentially homosexual practice of a lover and his boy was frowned upon by not just some in Athens, but in some in other Greek societies and other cities, and certainly other societies around the world. So he is here stating that there's really not anything that's intrinsically evil. There's really not anything that you can't do or shouldn't do. It's all about love, as you may have heard. So the common love, what is the common love that Pausanias is here referring to? He says that it's love, and he says this at 181b, by the way, love felt by the vulgar meaning the common. And the vulgar are those, interestingly, he says, who are attached to women no less than to boys. They're attached to the body more than to the soul. All right, so you can sort of see here that he is intimating that maybe the kind of erotic love that occurs between a man and a woman could be more focused on the soul. What he's really interested in is the purely bodily love, which is the love of the same, the love between two men. The heavenly Aphrodite, the heavenly love, is sort of trying to experience that same sort of heavenly love, but still with the body of another male. Now, Pausanias goes through some various proposals about how society should deal with the way in which a lover obtains a boy. He goes through actually a fairly detailed consideration of customs and why, for example, maybe the boy should play hard to get or what have you. And this takes us actually through a couple of 2 or 3 pages over to the end of 185c. He tries to portray the love, the heavenly love, with a concern for virtue. But it's clear ultimately from his considerations that what he is really concerned with is satisfaction of bodily sensations. That's Pausanias. Next up is supposed to be Aristophanes. Now, you may remember from the Apology when Socrates talked about the first accusers. One of the people who were mentioned as spreading these false opinions about him was Aristophanes. So you can imagine here that Plato, in writing the Symposium, does not have a good opinion of probably anybody here that he's portraying in terms of the first 5 speeches, but certainly has a very bad opinion of Aristophanes. So it is not surprising that Aristophanes is not able to speak in his proper turn. He has the hiccups. Eryximachus, who is supposed to be after Aristophanes, is a doctor, and he offers to cure Aristophanes of his hiccups. And we'll discuss the cure in a moment. But Aristophanes can't speak in turn, so Eryximachus has to speak instead. Eryximachus, again, is a doctor, and he tries to portray his view of love in terms of the art of medicine. So you'll notice medicine is guided by the god of love. He says that at 187a. Eryximachus ultimately, again, and we won't go into every detail of what Eryximachus says because time is running on. I can see the clock at 16 and a half minutes already. Eryximachus, as a doctor, is concerned with bodily health, and Eryximachus is ultimately going to portray love as a bodily reality. He's not going to be able to draw love beyond the body into the realm of the soul because he's a doctor and he's concerned with health, and the health mainly concerns the health of the body. So Aristophanes finally gets his turn. Right? He's been beset with hiccups, which are sort of like spasms, and this gives you an indication of how Plato is portraying Aristophanes, one who is concerned with the spasms of love. I'll let your own minds draw whatever conclusion you want about just exactly what that means in terms of what not only Aristophanes, but all of the first 5 speakers really think is the ultimate goal, the ultimate experience of love. Remember, they're down on the line. They're in the cave. They're not moving up as Socrates would think that would be the better way. Aristophanes comes up with an interesting consideration of how we came into being as beings of 2 sexes. He says originally human beings were 3. There were 3 kinds of sexual beings, and there were beings, and there were sort of like roly-poly beings with 2 sets of arms, 2 sets of legs, so 4 arms, 4 legs, and 2 heads. So there was one sort of roly-poly being which was completely male, one which was completely female, and one which was both male and female. Well, these human beings did something to offend the gods. And there are many stories like this in the ancient world where human beings did not act properly towards the gods, and the gods punished the human beings in some way, sometimes by means of a flood. But in this case, Zeus decides to split the human beings in half and rearrange their bodies so that we look as we look today. And so the bottom line for Aristophanes is that love is a seeking after wholeness. What we're seeking, we've been split, and what we're seeking is our other half. So this explains for Aristophanes why some men seek men, homosexual love of that type, why some women seek women, homosexual love of that type, and why some men and women seek each other, because it depends on how they were split. once again, if you glance through this idea, this story that Aristophanes is telling, while his sort of main line sounds kind of nice, love is the pursuit of wholeness, again, it's only wholeness of body. That's ultimately what Aristophanes is interested in. So we have 4 proposals so far. We have Phaedrus, Pausanias, Eryximachus, Aristophanes, all focused on supposedly praising the God of love, but praising the God of love in terms of the bodily experiences that love brings about. Now, after Aristophanes, it is Agathon's turn to speak. Agathon, of course, in a sense, is the star of the show, and this is where we actually begin our reading at 194e. So we go from 194e to 201d, which is most of what Agathon has to say. Agathon is going to introduce the concept of beauty, which we'll also see later in Socrates, but Agathon is not going to really be able to move beyond the beauty of the body. Even though he says some very highly poetic things, he still seems to be focused on the erotic attraction that human beings have in terms of their purely bodily attraction. Notice what he says, for example, about pleasure. This is between 196 C and D on page 180. No pleasure is more powerful than love. You can keep that in the back of your mind. When you get to Socrates, you're not going to really hear Socrates talking about pleasure in a bodily sense. But here's Agathon. No pleasure is more powerful than love. So it's a certain kind of love that he is focused on, and a certain experience of love that he is pursuing. Yes, he does introduce the concept of beauty. And he does, at 197 D to E, make a very dramatic conclusion to what he is attempting to say. I'm going to read that, and I want you to read along. If you can pause this and get your book out and read this. This is at the bottom of page 181. It starts at 197D. Here's what Agathon says. Love fills us with togetherness and drains all of our divisiveness away. Love calls gatherings like this together, in feasts and dances, in certain ceremonies. He gives the lead. Love moves us to mildness, removes us from wildness. He is a giver of kindness, never of meanness, gracious, kindly, let wise men see and gods admire. Treasure to lovers, envy to others, father of elegance, luxury, delicacy, grace, yearning, desire. Love cares well for good men, cares not for bad ones. In pain, in fear, in desire or speech, love is our best guide and guard. He is our comrade and our Savior. Ornament of all gods and men, most beautiful leader and the best. Every man should follow love, sing beautifully his hymns, and join with him in the song he sings that charms the mind of God or man. Of course, everyone applauds. It's a very beautiful speech, Agathon. You've done a great job. You're a playwright. Even though you mainly write tragedy, you have dramatically presented love in a way that certainly can't be denied is the best possible thing. Love is our best guide and guard. That's sort of Agathon's key phrase, right? Has he gotten beyond the body? Has he gone beyond the bodily erotic attraction, which is normal for human beings, but is it normal in the way that Agathon and the others are portraying it between a man and a younger man? Well, even though everyone burst into applause, it's clear that what Agathon is saying here is reminiscent, you'll see the name at 198c, reminiscent of Gorgias. Gorgias is one of the more famous sophists. If you remember, Socrates was accused of being a sophist, but he wasn't a sophist. Sophist was the one who makes the weaker argument seem the stronger. Basically, the sophist is the one who tries to convince you of the truth, even though what he's actually convincing you of is completely false. So here we see Agathon identified with Gorgias, and it seems that what he, and not only he, but the others who preceded him are saying is actually not true at all. It's not true at all that love has to remain at the bottom of the line, that it has to remain chained to the bench in the cave, that it has to remain only focused on the body. Love can rise above that, and we're now going to sort of, in a sense, find our way out of this sophistry as Socrates enters the picture. Now, they're supposed to be speeches, right? So they're not supposed to be questioning each other. But Socrates gets permission from Phaedrus just to ask Agathon a few questions in his normal fashion. And everybody says, oh, yeah, here goes Socrates, doing his usual thing. And he's going to try to trip up Agathon in some way. And he does, right? So he asks Agathon a very simple question. You'll find this at the bottom of page 183, just below 199e. He asks Agathon, is love the love of nothing or of something? And of course, Agathon immediately admits, well, it's got to be the love of something. Then what? Socrates says. Then what is it the love of, right? And if you read over to the top of the next page, near 201a, Socrates says, okay, Agathon, you say that love is the love of something. Let's review where we are, right? Love is the love of something, and love loves things of which he has a present need. What does he have a present need of? And if you drop down just to about below halfway through the page, you will see that Socrates says that what love needs is beautiful things. So if love needs beautiful things, and if all good things are beautiful, is it not the case that love needs good things as well? Isn't this what love is really after? Should we really leave this focused on the body? Socrates is sort of implying here to Agathon and to the others. Right? Now, Agathon has introduced beauty, but he hasn't really focused on beauty. And he certainly hasn't focused on what Socrates wants to focus on, and that's the form of beauty. Remember that when you get to the top of the divided line, when you get out of the cave, you're in the realm of the sun. You're in the realm of the forms. And if you get completely into the realm of the sun, you get completely into the realm of the form of the good. But on that journey, on that trek into the sun, you also encounter other forms, one of which is the all-important form of beauty. And so this is where Socrates is drawing the conversation now. He's drawing it further away from where it's been, drawing it away from the focus on the body, drawing it towards the focus on the forms, and drawing it towards a focus on the soul. This is where we transition then from the questioning of Agathon by Socrates, and this is where we go into the speech of Socrates himself. Socrates will not give a speech just based supposedly on what he thinks, but he will relate a speech or an encounter, actually, that he says that he had with a woman by the name of Diotima. The name means honored of God, God honored. Dio, God, Tima is the same word that we saw in Timocracy. So it's honored by God or honored of God is who Diotima is. Socrates is really going to take the discussion to the next level. And that's where we'll start in the next class.